Yeah.
That's,
Okay. So when did you first become interested in the Soviet Union or Russia, and when did you first go there?
well, I'll try to capsulize it. I worked internationally for a number of years after leaving Canada. As you may have seen, I went to Brazil for a couple of years with the UN, with ITU. And ostensibly, I was going to go back to Alberta government telephones in Western Canada and Alberta, but I never found my way back. I ended up in Nigeria for 2 years, and I was working for a U.S.-based company, U.S. company domiciled in Washington, D.C., and for my sins of doing so well in Nigeria, they decided that I should move to the United States with family. So my wife and 3 children, who also moved with me to Brazil. And so they managed to get us green cards, and we moved to Washington, D.C. Ooh, heavens, 76 and 78, something like that.
Yeah,
And,
you were Canadian citizens at that time?
Oh, yeah. We were born all Canadians.
Yeah.
And at any rate, I'll try and make it really quick. But
yeah,
by being in Washington, D.C., I was with a company that did international consulting all over pretty much South America, the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, a lot of different places.
Telecom consulting.
Always, yeah, in telecoms. We were the retained consultants to the Ministry of Communications of Indonesia for their satellite business development, for example. So I managed to be in several satellite launches on the shuttle in the good old days.
Wow.
So at any rate, the company I worked with, well, I got recruited by a headhunter to go up to Pennsylvania to set up an international and domestic consulting group up there. And that's when I started Diversified Communications, which is a company that I still am president of. But the guy that took over the consulting group, it was called Teleconsult in Washington, D.C., ended up selling it to USWI. USWI was one of the Bell operating companies.
Right.
And I happened to be in his office one day, and he said, okay, why don't you, I need some help. Why don't you come back? I'd worked with him for several years with Teleconsult. Why don't you come back and be my director of operations, which I did. So we started doing business in Russia in the late 80s, US West International, with basically working out of a regional office in Washington, D.C., because they had bought Teleconsult.
Okay.
And we started a couple of different projects, a very large one called the Trans-Soviet Fiber Optic Line, which is an optical fiber system that went from Moscow east to Vladivostok,
Yep.
then across to Korea and to Japan and all the way to Australia.
What year was that?
That was in 1989, 1990, I guess, 1990.
Wow. So you were working with the telecom monopoly.
We didn't have an office in Russia.
Yeah.
We were the partners with the Ministry of Communications of the Soviet Union. US West was. The optical fiber system was going to go west as well through Kingisepp, which is in northern near Petersburg, and down to Europe through the Scandinavian countries, and then south through the Black Sea into that sector of the woods. So we had a consortium that was just about every major telecoms entity in that could possibly be brought in from Deutsche Telekom, British Telecom, France Telecom, Spain. Then we had all the Scandinavians, and then we had on the other side we had KTA from Korea, from Japan, and also Australia. So it was a huge consortium.
Wow!
But US West and the Ministry of Communications of the Soviet Union were partners. So anyway, that started us going. And then from there, one day I was at a meeting in Italy, actually, and the president of our group, walked me around a park near the Spanish Steps for, I think it seemed like about 3 days, to convince me that we needed to open an office somewhere in Europe because we were doing so much international work. And of course, he left it up to me to decide where. And I said, well, Dick, where do you think it could be, considering the bulk of our work is in Russia or is in the Soviet Union? So all that said, my wife and I moved to Russia in 1991 in January and started the very first US West international office.
Wow. Wow. Now, was somehow Gary Hart involved in this?
Oh, yeah, I can definitely bring that in. What happened is then, as we moved there in January 1991. Well, of course, in the summer of 1991, there was a little thing called a push.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we'd made quite a few commitments. One of them was to build, if you know what international gateway switches are.
Yeah.
We were building I started a company, and we were going to put 3 international gateway switches, one Petersburg, one Moscow, and one in Kiev.
Yeah.
And we were still also doing cellular. We convinced the minister, at that time he was the first deputy, that he needed cellular in Russia. And so we began setting up the very first cellular company in St. Petersburg called Telecom.
Okay.
That was the very first cellular company in the Soviet Union. And then, of course, we had a coup, and everybody left town, except my wife and I. We said, we're not leaving. And we stayed, and a lot of big companies left. And about later that year, there was a big ITU conference in Geneva, if you're familiar with the ITU.
Yes.
Minister Bulgak had taken over, because when the coup took place and the communists fell, Gennady Kudryavtsev, who was the first deputy minister, he was no longer in a powerful seat. So Minister Bulgak took over, because he at that time was the Minister of Communications of Russia. And that's when the Soviet Union broke up and Russia was Russia.
Right.
So he's giving a little presentation, and we're all sitting out in the audience. There must have been, I don't know, close to 1,000 people. There was a lot. And he said, well, it's nice to see all you people here again, i.e. like he was back in Moscow, but it's nice to see you all here again. But he said, the ones that I really like to see are the ones that didn't leave. And he pointed out me, and he said, like Cramton, they stayed. And that was the genesis for us to get going, because we just, in the process then of being in Russia for the next 4 years, I was able to be a co-founder of 12 cellular companies in Russia, notwithstanding one in Hungary, one in Czechoslovakia in that time, one in Lithuania. So it just was, we couldn't do enough things. I went to Romania. I was invited to see the minister in Romania. He said, oh, you got to come back. And I went back to the US West board, and they said, you got enough on your plate, Crampton, cool your jets.
Yeah.
So that's a long way of answering, but that's how we ended up in Russia, was basically the TSL project, the Trans-Soviet Line project, was the impetus for us to move there. And when we got there, we started all the other business activity.
Right. And did the trunk line get built? The fiber
Sadly
optic?
enough, I don't know if you remember COCOM, the Coordinating Committee for the Control of Export to...
Right.
Okay. Well, while we were busy planning for that, we had a meeting in James Baker's office. That's at that time was before he became the Secretary of the Secretary of State for Bush.
Yeah.
And we had this guy from the State Department, whose name I will not utter. And he said, well, I think the Soviets are going to use that fiber optic line to launch ICBMs. And I said, well, I don't think they are, because they don't want to start a war. And besides, communism, in case you didn't notice, has collapsed. It went back and forth and back and forth. So I said, well, when was the last time you were in Russia? And he kept dodging the question. And finally, I said, look, I don't think your information is up to date. I live there. I know the Russians.
Yeah.
And so I'd really like to know, when's the last time you were there? And his answer was, well, actually, I've never been there. I have too much knowledge in my head. I'm not allowed to go. We did not build the CSL line because we couldn't get approval for the switches that were going to be used because the Russians were going to use them to launch ICBMs.
I see.
So the US State Department wouldn't give us the process to go forward. All the other members of the consortium went ahead with it, all our good European friends. So the TSL line got built, but we weren't a part of it.
Okay. And
But-
what the part that was built was from Moscow to Europe, right?
Yes, Moscow to Europe, but also Moscow to Vladivostok.
Oh, it was also built.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you follow the rail lines?
It pretty much did, yeah.
Yeah.
It pretty much did. But we just got out of that, and it didn't get built in the manner that we had initially had envisioned it because of all the political issues. But by that time, we were so focused on building cellular activities,
Right.
And then the gateway switches,
Right.
that we really didn't care about the TSL line.
Right. And the gateway switches were not subject to this kind of export control.
Well, that became a little bit later. We had to do a little dancing because we ended up putting in Ericsson switches. And by the way, the one in Kiev didn't get built for reasons you can probably figure out. So we put two in Moscow and one in St. Petersburg. But our partner was Russian Rostelecom.
Rostelecom, yeah.
50-50 partners. And I tell you, Daniel, that was a license to print money. In those days, as you may recall, to make a call, you had to book it.
Yes, I remember doing it.
And the calls were not exactly cheap, and they were difficult to make, and it was a real pain. So if you think about it, it was a very fortuitous time for us to be there, for USWIS to be there, because the opportunities were just unbelievable. And to build and put into operation international gateway switches, to build and put into operation cellular activities was just phenomenal. It was as fast as we could do it, we could get business.
Right.
And if you think about it, when we went there in January, well, before even in the 80s or in January when we moved there in 1991, in order to make an international call, you had to go to a booking station. Then you could go to the Savoy Hotel and make it from the payphone in the lobby.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, in a year and a half, I think it was a year and a half, maybe it was a little bit more, had to be a little bit more. I am sitting in my car on my cell phone making an international call.
Wow.
So it was just phenomenal.
Yeah. The speed of change. And were your customers at that point primarily foreigners and foreign companies?
No. You mean for the gateway switches?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't mean your partner. I mean the users.
Yeah. Well, the users, the cellular was the big bricks, as you may recall. They weren't convenient, and they certainly weren't cheap. Right. So there were a lot of foreign customers, and to those Russians who had the wherewithal, they became customers as well. But to start with, it was pricey. The calls, we kept the rates for, I don't remember offhand what the rates for the international calls were, but we didn't sock it to them at all like you were paying $5 or $6 a minute for an international call before.
Yeah.
So, but it was just, I mean, we honestly had a little bit of a difficult time convincing Minister Kudryasov that cellular was going to work. And then at that time, there was a guy by the name of Leonid Raymond. If you remember him?
Oh, yes, I remember him.
I know Leonid very well. He's a good friend.
Okay.
And when we started raising money for cellular, he was a part of the St. Petersburg group. He was the deputy to, oh, good heavens, how can I not remember his name? Super nice guy as well. I'll think of it anyway. But he was the guy, he was my counterpart because he basically was responsible for all of our activities in St. Petersburg when we were building Delta Telecom.
Right.
And we were raising funds one time, and I think it was in New York. And he was telling me afterwards, this was several years later, he said, you know, Cramton, when we were looking for raising funds, if we'd have told those guys, those those people who were looking to raise funds from, that the number of cellular users in Russia would be, well, at that time, whatever it was, 4 or 5 million. He said they'd send us directly to the funny farm.
Yeah.
But it was unbelievable. It truly was. So the businesses took off. We started Delta Telecom with the St. Petersburg group, but in every single cellular company that I was involved in getting started, we had a third USWIS, a third Rostelecom, and a third the local electricians.
Oh, okay.
And we never, ever had a problem with any of the partners. We never had any issues. We adhered to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act to the letter. They all knew it. The good news was, and it was a little easier, is that if somebody waltzed into my office and said, well, I've got a real big opportunity for you, and it only takes this or that, I would say, well, you know what I'll do? Gennady Kudryasov. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll discuss it with him. And if he thinks it's a good idea, drop back again and we'll discuss it. Well, of course, they never came back.
Never came back.
If we needed anything, we were lucky enough to be dealing with the top people.
Right. And so for those top people, you were the source of technology and expertise that they recognize that they need. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. US West was a pretty major player in cellular in the US, but the footprint US West had in those days was very adaptive to Russia, because it wasn't the largest operating company by revenue, but it was the largest operating company by territory.
Okay.
We had a natural relationship with Russia because they could see. And we ended up taking the minister on a little tour of the US West Cellular and to convince him that it was going to work.
Right.
But, and I think, in all fairness, I am an American citizen, a very proud one. I will hasten to add. When we moved to Russia in 1991, we became American citizens because our green cards would have been whatever. But I think our background from Canada was a big help. When I grew up, or both my wife and I grew up in Western Canada, in Alberta, there were a lot of first-generation immigrants. Ukrainian, Russian, all sorts, Polish, and so on. So we knew how to deal with people.
What do you mean by that? Explain that in a little more detail.
Well, ethnically, even language-wise, a lot of the people who immigrated to Alberta, their parents, the people who we grew up with, their parents were immigrants from other countries. So foreign dialects and foreign languages were not as big a challenge to us as they were to some people from Midwest in the U.S. who had a little more difficult understanding some of the things that were coming down. And I think we just assimilated very well. My wife was an enormous asset to US West when she was there. She became involved with the International Women's Group. She got to know the wives of a lot of the people when other people said, they'll never invite Eileen. My wife's name is Eileen. They'll never invite her to their homes because that doesn't happen.
Right.
She's a good friend, and still is a good friend of Kudryasov's wife. They exchange emails all the time.
Yeah, and she learned Russian. She learned Russian.
No, she's Canadian Norwegian.
Yeah. So neither one of you spoke Russian, but you just were comfortable being in a multilingual.
Well, we lived in Brazil and had to learn to speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
That helped a little bit, but Russian's a hard language to learn. I stumbled through it. Eileen became far more proficient at it than I did.
Yeah.
I had the benefit of an extremely great staff, both Russian and non-Russian. And so our business language, we were in the MEJ, if you remember the MEJ.
Sure.
Yeah. Our business language in MEJ was English.
Was English. Okay. And so, you're describing building out this company very rapidly and smaller companies around. How did you staff that? Did you hire Russians and train them? Did you bring in expats? How did you develop?
All the above.
All the above.
But I didn't bring very many expats. And I had a CFO who was a Brit,
Uh-huh.
I had a director of operations. I brought him in actually on the pretext that we were going to be doing the TSL project because he was an outside construction guy.
Yeah.
I had, let's see, a couple of other. We had a guy by the name of Dmitry Kononov, who was an American, but parents moved from Russia, so he spoke Russian. He was involved in the Petersburg operation, eventually became the CFO of Megaphone. But most of the other staff were Russians. But we pulled in a lot of people from US West had an organization called Advanced Technologies. And that was kind of like the Bell Labs, if you remember Bell Labs for AT&T.
Yeah.
Advanced Technologies was the Bell Labs equivalent for US West. And so I had the capability of bringing in all sorts of technical, very smart guys when needed.
Yeah.
So we did a lot. We did a lot of stuff in country in Russia, and we did some in offsite in Colorado.
Right. So did you send Russians to Colorado for training and?
Oh yeah, we did. We actually, believe it or not, we actually selected people from our staff in our office because here it's kind of a little funny aside. When we set up the office in the Arm and Hammer building, we set up a very modern, up-to-date office we had the corner offices for the senior people, but the bulk of them were kiosks.
Okay.
And it was really, the Russians loved it. And the Americans in Denver who would be calling in, we didn't have video in those days. They'd say, well, who's this and who's that? So we sent a group of our girls, women, and they went and visited Denver, the US West people, and then the people from US West in Denver came and saw us.
Okay.
So they obviously the ones we sent were English as well as Russian speaking, but so yeah, we definitely exchanged a lot.
Yeah. And did you find that what the skills the Russians needed were business skills or technical skills or both?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. Although we provided, I hate to say this delicately, we provided the impotence. I mean, let's face it, they didn't have the technical skills in cellular because that wasn't their forte.
Right.
But we did have that. They didn't have the business skills, but they were damn fine partners and quick learners. So we didn't have a problem with business skills at all. Yeah.
And so how big a staff did you, how did your staff grow? Like what was number sort of?
I think by the time I left, that's a good question. I'm trying to remember how many we probably had maybe 50 or 60.
Okay. Well, that's
that's counting if you look at, for example, Moscow. Moscow Cellular was the second cellular company that we started, and that was actually one of the big players there was Fyodorov, if you remember him, the eye surgeon.
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
He was kind of a political appointee, but he was on the board. He was actually the chairman of the board, and great guy, super interesting character. But again, it was a US West, Moscow. What the heck was his name? Jeez, great guy, huge, great big guy. Was the head of the Moscow operating telephone company. And then, of course, Rostelecom were a third. Right.
So, what did you use contractors to construct your cell towers and build out your infrastructure?
Yep.
And so with these Russians?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you just provided them blueprints and specs, and they performed.
We put out specs, and they were bid, especially for the gateway switches. That became quite a horrendous show because we had some sly people who were trying to slip through the cracks in terms of the gateway switches were pretty pricey.
Yeah.
And they were going to do something if we would do something, but we never had an issue at all. I started out to say we put the gateway switches in. We had them built in. They were Ericsson switches, but they were built in by Nikola Tesla.
Okay.
And under contract, because that was it. The Nikola Tesla people had that agreement with Ericsson.
Okay.
So the switches were really built in Croatia and brought to Russia, but the design and all the capability was Ericsson.
I see.
And they didn't have the same. There were certain software elements in the software that we were going to use for the TSL project that we had quite a little pushback again from the State Department. We were able to avoid that. I mean, simply because we said, look, these switches are, they're being built everywhere, and if you don't allow us to get them, then it's just going to go to somebody else. So
right, yeah,
it became a straightforward thing. Anyway, you asked me about Gary Hart. When Gary Hart ran for president and ended up having a little fallback, he was a senator from Colorado, and he needed some help fundraising because the Democrats basically cut him off.
Yeah.
So and at that time, when he was on the Senate, he was the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And so US West hired him for his international savoir-faire, so to speak. And he was actually really, really good. He didn't do a whole hell of a lot in terms of getting to know the people, because by the time he got involved, we pretty much had it in place. When the first coup took place, he offered to come over, and the chairman of the board of US West said, well, do you want him, or do you want me to send the corporate jet over to pick you and Eileen up? And I said, I don't want any more people here. We've closed all of the expats that were here. We sent out. And we're staying. And there's no reason to send a corporate jet, because firstly, you probably couldn't get it into Russia or into Moscow. So I'd have to get to Petersburg or someplace, and I'm not leaving. But Gary offered to come in, and I said, thank you, but no thanks. He did provide some high-level help on certain occasions, but our relationship with the minister was not helpful, not done by Gary Hart.
I see.
It was just a very high-level umbrella that we used. And I became very, very confident that Gary could have and would have been a great president.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He's a very smooth operator.
Yeah.
And he did not take credit unless he earned it. He was just really a decent guy.
And yeah, so let me say, you may have said this already, and maybe I'm just blocking on this. How did US West make that initial contact? You say it was already there, and I understand you built it around the cable project. I mean, the fiber optic cable project, but somebody got that.
Well, it started with when we were still in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
A guy by the name of Andreas Bonde, who was at that time one of the senior executives in US West International, and who had worked with me. I'd worked with him in Teleconsult. He became aware of it. As far as I know, I'm not sure who initiated it. It could have been Dick Callahan, who was the group president. But somewhere along the line, somebody got word of the fact that the Russians were planning, or the Soviets were planning on building this big optical fiber line. And we got involved with it and went over and took a delegation over and visited with the top people from the Ministry of Communications, and one thing led to another.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so as your understanding of them, were they committed at that point to expanding access to telecommunications, or was it a modernization project to just keep up? Or
they certainly were not committed to cellular. We had to pretty much drag them through the knothole for that one. As I said, we took the minister and some of his top people to Seattle, to USWI cellular operations to show them what it could be. But Gennady Kudryavtsev is a really sharp guy. And another, as I said, a very good friend. And he could see the opportunities. And if you remember, the infrastructure in Russia at that time was pretty bad. I mean,
it was like 20-year waits for copper lines.
It was a perfect, cellular was a perfect solution for Russia, without any doubt whatsoever.
Yeah.
And as a result, Gennady saw that, and he saw how he could leapfrog all the old infrastructure and just put in cellular. So that's why today I think there are more phones per capita in Russia than any other country in the world.
Right. So he saw that, he recognized it, the potential of the technology, and was a willing partner. It wasn't, like.
Oh no, he was definitely a willing partner. Once we got him convinced to do cellular, he was a very big help. In fact, he was even a big help when we finished the gateway switch in Moscow. He said to me one time in a little private tete-a-tete, I think you ought to take a little trip back to Lithuania, because I'd been to Lithuania when we were doing TSL. Yeah, I'd met the minister, and he said, I think you ought to go back and see Minister Kuzmo, I think it was. They're planning now, because that's when Lithuania broke away, and they're planning to put in their own gateway switch. And you probably may want to have a little chat with them. So I immediately did a little chatting, and the end result was we started a gateway switch company in Lithuania, as well as a cellular company.
Right.
So,
so were you the first in there, or were there other people doing cellular at that point?
In Lithuania?
No, I'm in Russia.
Oh, no, there was another company there called Bell Mead. And they really tried to make it like they were a part of the Bell system, which they weren't. And then there was a company called MCC. No, not MCC. What was it? It was a Scandinavian company.
Okay.
They were partners. Actually, they were partners. Come to think of it, that's not correct. It wasn't the third for Moscow Cellular. That was all the other ones. Moscow Cellular was a combination of, gosh, I can't think of the numbers now, the division, but it was the iSurgeon had a small piece. The operating telephone company from Moscow had a piece. This other company, gosh, I can't think of, they were pretty big in Europe. Gosh, that's terrible. I can't think of seem to think it wasn't Moscow Cellular, but it was something like MCC.
Okay.
And they had a piece, and then of course USWIs had a piece, and actually I think I'm wrong. I don't think that Rostelecom were a part of that. Now that I think about it, it was pretty fragmented, that partnership.
Okay. Yeah. So your build out of cellular really accelerated after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, in the summer of August of 1991, we were just basically focusing on Delta Telecom and Moscow Cellular.
Okay.
And neither one of them were operational at that time.
Okay. And did you how about Soviet Teleport? Did you ever any?
We actually took a real hard look at that. And I was a big proponent of it because I'd done satellite work in Indonesia before. And they were setting up an office in the Metropole Hotel. But I was not able to convince the gurus at US West that we should take another dive into another technology, because at that time US West wasn't doing too much in satellites rather.
I see. I see. I see. So just two different approaches and technology approaches then.
Cellular and gateway switches.
Yeah. Okay. And where was your gateway switch located in Moscow?
I can't give you the exact address.
Was it on Tverskaya in that telecom building?
No, neither one of them were in that telecom building. That was where the ministry was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
No, neither one of them were there. They were. I have had dozens and dozens of meetings, but I can't tell you where they were located. One was in southwest, and one was in central.
Okay.
And then there was one in Petersburg.
Okay. And did you?
They were located where there were cable, because there had to be cable access.
Right.
Big cable access.
Yeah. And did you have any relationship with the development of the Russian trading system and the stock market? Did you service them?
If we did, I couldn't tell you who the customers were.
Okay.
Really.
Okay.
I mean, I was beyond getting into the details of who the good customers were, who they were not.
Yeah. So you were managing it at the installation and the top level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And how long were you there?
I was with US West in Russia for little over 4 years, 4.5 years, something like that. Then US West decided we were only supposed to be there 2. And when we first went there, if you remember what Russia was like in those days, it was kind of a little bit of a challenge.
Right.
So by that time, US West had opened their international main headquarters in London, in Berkeley Square. And so I think it was probably more the wife of the of the group president, Dick Callahan's wife, who said, "Okay, Dick, I don't care what you do with Stan, but Stan's wife has done a hard time. They needed something better." I'm being facetious because by that time, US West decided that they were going to get into satellites.
Okay.
And I had been involved with satellites in Indonesia, and I'd been in Russia for over 4 years. And so I moved to London and became the vice president of satellite business development.
I see.
And we cut a deal with a couple of satellite companies, and we were really going forward pretty well when US West had a new guy take over as chairman of the board. He was a college professor, didn't really understand international at all, and really didn't really like the domestic operation that much either. He came over to Russia, toured around Russia, and I thought, man, this is not a good sign. And a couple of years later, he decided to sell all the parts of US West off. But in the meantime, he decided to sell off all the other operations. By that time, I'll give him credit. What he was focusing on was doing cable.
Yeah.
And so that became the genesis of US West operations domestically. But before that, US West had cable operations in London and a few other places. And of course, all the international operations in Russia, in Hong Kong, in a few other places, in Poland, and so on. So the US West Russian operations were sold to AT&T.
Wow.
And then AT&T sold them to another company, and that company sold them to a guy by the name of Jeff Galmont. This was a company called RTDC, which was basically the company that we started, that was the holding company for all of US West assets in Russia.
Okay.
Russia Telecommunications Development Corporation. It was a Delaware company, and had a hard time explaining why a Delaware company was but you know the story of why it's Delaware.
Right.
So RTDC was sold to AT&T and then sold to another company from the US, and then ultimately was bought by Jeff Galmont.
Jeff Galmont? How do you spell that name?
Galmond. he was the lawyer. He was a Danish lawyer. Is a Danish lawyer who was the retained. Well, he was a lawyer for the Russians when we started Delta Telecom.
Okay.
US West, of course, had their own cadre of lawyers. And then after we formed Delta, we had to hire a corporate lawyer, and we retained Jeff Galmont.
Okay.
As our
was he resident in Russia?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was in St. Petersburg.
Okay.
And he had a law office in Petersburg.
And this RTDC was in Russian regions too, wasn't it?
Well, sure, because it was the holding company.
Yeah.
All of the cellular companies.
Right.
So if you had a company, for example, Dontelecom in Rostov-on-Don, RTDC was a third shareholder. Same thing in all the other companies that we started. RTDC was the shareholder, even though it was US West, but RTDC was wholly owned by US West.
I see. And so I think I encountered them maybe in Perm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. What was the name of that company? I think it was called was it Ajax? No, that was. Yeah. Well, there were. I don't even remember the names of all of them, and of course, they all got changed and all got bought out.
They all got bought out and became regional cellular companies.
Yeah. When US West decided to sell out, I knew all of the operating cellular companies. Good heavens, my brain's going bad. Who started Beeline? Dmitry. Yeah. Anyway, I knew him. He came to us and wanted us to do a deal with him. And unfortunately, by that time, I was on my way out to London.
Yeah.
And the guy that was taking over for me said, "Nah, we don't need that guy." Well, that guy started Beeline, which became one of the dominant companies in Russia. But when I left to go to London, US West's entities were the largest operating cellular companies in Russia.
Wow.
There was Beeline, Megaphone, and of course MTS.
Right.
None of the three were as big as the combined all three or all of US West holdings at that time in Russia.
Really? Yeah. So where did those companies come from? Those Russian companies? I mean, you came in, you knew the technology, you had the business background. Somehow those Russian companies sort of sprouted. Where'd they get their base from?
The Russians are smart business people. I have a very high regard for them, and they saw what was happening, and so it became a competitive thing to get licenses. So Megaphone was closely aligned with Leonid Raymond.
Yep.
And Dmitry Kononov, who used to work for US West. Beeline, I don't remember how it got started, but Dmitry, I'll think of his name anyway. He just died actually. And then MTS. So they were all a part of the Telecom's hierarchy in Russia.
I see.
And there was enough people there and enough money that when licenses started being issued, they were able to gather up some as well. So if you look at the market value today of any one of those big three, that's basically who's left. Yeah. MTS, Beeline, and Megaphone. I guess individually, any one of them individually is probably worth $4, maybe more billion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they saw the opportunity and they capitalized on it. Whereas, unfortunately, US West left at a very, very bad time because Dick Callahan, who was the group president, worked very, very hard to try to convince the US West board in Colorado to spin off the international group and don't sell it.
Yeah.
Even though they were selling everything else to keep it intact. And he unfortunately wasn't successful because they just said, no, we're getting out of it.
Wow.
So they walked away from a huge, huge potential business.
Yeah. And there's did you have foreign or American competitors in cellular aside from these three big
Only
Russian
that one,
groups?
only the one that I think is MCC or something like that. That was
Yeah,
pretty,
they're the only ones. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So the market was just occupied by.
Wait a minute. I think Deutsche Telekom had a holding, had a member, had some ownership in MTS,
Okay.
but I'm
Okay.
not sure about that. That was after I left.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, and you never had, I mean, there was Comstar, there was
Yep.
the Bell something, Bell,
Bell Mead.
okay.
That
Yeah.
was the one that was supposedly a partner in Moscow Cellular.
Yeah.
They were bidding for the license, but it got a little dicey, but I think we ended up easing them out the door.
Okay. And Comstar was just satellite.
Yeah. Yeah.
No cellular.
No, they had some domestic long distance, but not satellite.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, not cellular.
And were you involved with the country club and golf and all
Oh,
that
I lived
stuff?
there.
Huh? Yeah.
We were the first residents in the Moscow Country Club.
Really?
Yes.
Well, what does that mean? You were the first residents?
Well, because when the Moscow Country Club was started, there was a group, Fraser Lawson, who still lives in Russia, and a partner, and some group that they worked for were developing the dachas in and around the golf club. Golf club was run by the Optic.
Uh-huh.
And this other guy who was a big entrepreneur was building dachas. And Fraser, and I'd known Fraser, managed to convince us that we needed to have a dacha built by the Finns.
Okay.
And so we moved to the country club along with the head of General Motors, Max Danovich, if you remember that name.
No, I don't. No. Yeah.
Max is obviously not there, but he was there as the head of General Motors. We were there as head of US West, and there was another couple from an oil company. But we actually moved into our dacha. We were the first occupants of the Moscow Country Club. In fact, we lived in the hotel for a couple of months because the dacha wasn't finished.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, we know the dacha.
And that was when you first moved to Russia?
When we moved in 1991, we actually stayed in the Savoy Hotel for several months.
Okay. Okay.
And then I was walking by the Metropole one day and I saw a big sign saying Intercontinental opening soon. And I thought I died and gone to heaven, because when I worked with the company from Washington, D.C., the Intercontinental Six Continents Club was my go-to place.
I see.
So we were also the first residents of the Metropole when it opened.
Okay.
And we lived there for, oh heavens, close to a year, maybe longer. My wife would certainly know because I was very happy. I mean, it was central, easy to get to and so on. We watched the first coup from the Pierre Cardin suite in the Metropole Hotel. And I can tell you that was a pretty sad day because I was looking out over towards Red Square and I can distinctly remember it today. The moon was shining and I'm thinking, here it is, August 1991, all the time we spent here, and it's going to get flushed.
Yeah.
So I had in fact, we had a direct line put in by the minister. Fortunately for us, it was easy for him to monitor it that way as well. But
right.
Whatever the case, I had a call with Reuters, and I had an interview with the guy. But the end result anyway was that we lived in the Metropole for quite a while. My wife decided that enough was enough. She found a dacha on the edge of town in a nice development that was really, it wasn't really nice. It was pretty dismal, but we did a remont of one of the buildings, which she looked after, and we lived there for a while. And then we moved to the Moscow Country Club.
I see. Okay, so that was your primary residence there.
The Moscow
Yeah.
Country Club.
Yeah,
In the final analysis, it was, yes.
yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Are you a golfer?
I pretend to be.
Okay, all
I
right.
still have a membership there
Wow.
in the
So-
Moscow Country Club.
Yeah. So
I
how?
don't know if you heard that beautiful, beautiful clubhouse burned down.
Okay. I'm not a golfer. I was never
Oh.
there.
It was a gorgeous clubhouse.
Yeah.
Really was gorgeous. And it burned down a year and a half ago.
Ah, okay. Suspicious or?
I don't know. It probably was, there were a lot of different activities going on. There were 2 or 3 fireplaces. There were several kitchens. It's hard to
Yeah.
say.
Okay. And how important was the country club as a center of expat life?
It was pretty important. I wouldn't say it was the center, but there were certainly a bunch of guys that hung out there. If you remember a name by Jeff Combs, who was a great golfer.
Yeah.
Robert Conroy. Oh no, yeah. Mark. Mark. He was a real estate guy. So there was a lot of guys that hung around out there.
Right.
But,
right. And would you say it was a place where people made business contacts or not?
I never made any contacts that were business wise.
Yeah.
Maybe a few peripheral for
Right.
some other type of activity, like you needed some sort of a side activity like a car or something like that. But
Yeah.
nothing really that had to do with the telecoms now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And did Russians join the?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of very good Russian golfers. In fact, Eileen, my wife, actually was a marshal for one of the women's events, and she just told me a couple of days ago she's got to look up some of those golfers to see if they're still around, what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I gotta say that after US West sold all their assets, we decided to. I still had my company, Diversified Communications. Well, we parked it on a shelf. We were working in London, and we were at a big trade show, and I met a guy by the name of Olaf Lundberg, who I'd known before. He was the head of a company called ICO Global.
Okay.
One of the satellite companies.
Uh-huh.
And asked me what I was doing, and one thing led to another. So I went back out to Russia and headed up ICO Global Telecommunications. And the guy from Beeline was Dmitry Zamin.
Ah, yes, right.
So we started a company called ICO or whatever it was, but Dmitry Zamin and Beeline became partners with ICO Global. And we started the development of a satellite business development system in Russia, which unfortunately would have been a great success had GSM not kind of taken over. So we were using a different technology. We were using an NMT 450. They were, or rather CDMA 450, and they were using GSM.
I see.
But
I see.
it's still, I think it still has a couple of satellites floating around somewhere. So I ran ICO for, I guess 2 or 3 years. And then Jeff Galmont, who had bought RTDC, by that time it wasn't doing so well. So he asked me if I could rebuild it using a different technology. So I ended up going back, and as I said to Jeff, you want me to rebuild Humpty Dumpty?
Yeah.
And so I went back and put RTDC together again. And we bought,
you living there or remotely?
yeah. Well, but when I moved back, when we were in London.
Yeah.
We're taking up too much time here, but
That's
when
okay.
we were in London, my wife said it would really be nice if she could be reintroduced to her furniture, which was in storage. So we ended up having a house built in Florida.
Uh-huh.
And so she became, if you know what in Florida rules, she became a homesteader here. she had to be here 181 days. I started back in Russia with ICO and a few others, and I became a permanent resident, so I had to be there 181 days. So we did quite a bit of back and forth travel.
Yeah.
But I stayed, when I first moved back to Russia from London, I stayed in no other place in the metropole. And then a guy that was the general director of the Marriott Royal Aurora Hotel found out I was there, and he said, look, we have a beautiful suite here that the former general manager lived in with his two kids. It was it wasn't a hotel suite. It was actually built for the resident manager to live in.
Uh-huh.
He said, I'm not living in the place I'm managing. I'll cut you a deal. So we leased it. So we actually lived in the Marriott Royal Aurora Hotel for all the period of time I was there.
Okay. Okay. And so what did you do to rebuild RTDC?
We ended up rebuilding it on the basis of a different technology, CDMA 450.
Okay.
And we bought a number of different companies back to life that were the old technology, and started out building companies that were providing cellular, but a different, as I said, a different technology. And we did partnerships with 2 or 3 other locations. And then we started a company called Skylink. If you know the company Skylink.
Sounds vaguely familiar. What is that?
Well, basically, Skylink was all the companies that we started under one umbrella that were the old that we bought under the RTDC mantle.
Okay.
And that eventually, when I left, that was sold to Rostelecom.
Okay. And when did you leave that time?
Well, at the same time when I was there, I was on the board of a company called Trivon, which was doing other kinds of cellular activities.
Okay.
It was a company that on that board, or rather on the investors included Richard Branson.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And so we started a company called Virgin Connect, which is still operating in Russia today.
Cellular?
Yep.
Okay.
But both cellular and interconnection. So it's more of a different technology, but it was basically almost internet. Well, it was internet.
Okay.
Pretty much internet, focused on internet.
Okay. Okay.
So I was on the board of that, and then I became chairman of the board, and I was chairman of that company for a couple of years. Richard Branson was one of the investors, International Finance Corporation, EBRD, and a group from Switzerland.
Okay. So what years were you back when you were back the second time? What years were you there?
I'm trying to think. When did I go back? I moved to London in 1995.
Yeah.
And I was there for a couple of years. So I guess it would have been 96, not or 97.
Before the crash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Then in 2003, that's when trying to think. I'm looking at my CV here to see if I had it right. I went back to Moscow in 1996. In 1996 to 2003, I was involved with ICO and several other different entities in Russia.
Okay.
And then in 2003, Rostelecom Leasing, which was obviously a subsidiary of Rostelecom, were the new owners of our RTDC, asked me to become the president and CEO of that company. That was connected with Jeff Galmont.
I see. Okay. And how long were you there then with RTDC?
I basically ran that business until 2019.
Whoa. Okay.
Yep.
So,
Well, like maybe that was, no, that's not quite accurate. I ran that business, but it was ultimately sold because there was a company in Chelyabinsk, Apex. There was a company in Kaliningrad, KMN, in Saratov, in Ural Westcom, which was one of the US West companies, and in Lake Baikal Westcom, and so on. Anyway, in 2012, then I became chairman of the board of Trivon, and
okay.
that's when that was a full-time working board position.
I see.
So in 2012, and I was there until 2015 or 16, and then in 2019, I started working out of the US here.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. And are you still active in telecom?
I am still working for a company called Ragent, which is a US-based company, trying to get them established in a foothold in Russia.
Uh-huh.
It's a challenge in today's world, given what's happening. And if we can get that over, and I think it will be over, then I'll be probably going back sometime in April or May.
Okay. Okay. I mean, quite apart from anything having to do with the book, I can't figure out what Biden is doing. And do you have
that's not hard to understand, because I don't think he knows.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is, you obviously know Russian history. You know the Crimea, you know that Putin didn't take it, he took it back.
Yeah.
You know, all the bottom line here is this all has to do with NATO.
Yeah. Right.
If the stupid Americans, including the generals and the media and the White House, would figure it out, this is something between Russia and the United States. It's NATO based.
Right.
It has nothing to do with anything else
It's not to do with Ukraine. I've heard Lukyanov, who's an advisor to Putin, say that this is really not about Ukraine. It's about security in Europe.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You know, and then I read, you know Jack Matlock, right?
Yes, of course. When he was ambassador. Yeah.
Yeah. So he wrote something recently, which he said, "I've come to the conclusion that this is a way for Biden to build his popularity in the face of his domestic problems."
I think it is. It's a diversion because of all the things that he screwed up domestically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That is.
And then he's got, unfortunately, and as I said, I am a proud American.
Right.
But when you come to some of the retired military generals, these guys have got a different agenda. All they want to do is get more war games going and sell more armaments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, the media, including both the left and right wing media, I don't know where their brains are, but they're just pumping this up because I guess it's news.
Yeah.
It's all the core of this is Biden and his boneheaded approach to everything that he's trying to do. It's terrible, really terrible.
It is. I mean, I can only turn it on for about 5 or 6 minutes.
I'm the same way, Dad. Yeah. I am. In fact, my wife says you can't watch TV anymore because you just get too fired up. But
yeah, that's what my wife tells me too. So she's given up on it completely. So she's trying to convince me of the same. I feel like I need to know what's going on or what's being said, and I can't stand it.
This company that I was telling you about that I'm doing consulting for, I've dug up a lot of articles and a lot of history, and I've basically been giving them a quick lesson in Russian history.
Right.
It's so far from reality what is being portrayed by the White House. It's going to be a war and they're going to do this. And my big concern is that I don't think Putin has any intention whatsoever of having a war, but I'm not so sure about some of the other boneheads inadvertently starting one.
Right. That's the danger. That's the danger. The rhetoric becomes self-perpetuating.
Yeah. So, but hopefully, hopefully it'll calm down and some sanity will ultimately rear its ugly head.
Right.
And
Right.
things will get back to some semblance of normal. Right now, I got to say this. I mean, I'm not saying Putin is a super great guy. In fact, I met him when he was the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg when we were starting Delta Telecom. But I think he's probably having lots of fun pulling strings right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's smart.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, listen, I'll just kind of wrap this up in saying that my hope for this book is that at some point in the future, there'll be some young people who will want to know about this period for the sake of trying to have some rational relations between the two countries.
Good.
And
I think
this experience, it's important to preserve it.
Yeah, it is. It truly is. And I will get a hold of Bob Agee, and
great.
I'll either have him call you or give you his information as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And once I get around to writing about telecom, I may want to get back to you. But if and when I use information from this interview, I'll clear it with you.
Yeah. Okay.
So that you can say, "Oh yeah, I'm okay with that."
I probably need to check on some of my dates because,
unfortunately,
but
yeah,
pretty close.
Just in case you feel anything is, oh no, I don't want that in writing. So I want you to feel good about this when it's done. So okay.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. And if you can get me that access to Bob Agee, that would be fantastic.
I'm working that right away.
Okay. All right. Take care. Have a good day.
Same.
Enjoy that cool weather.
Oh, I'll try.
Yeah.
I'll try.
All right.
See you, Daniel.
All right. Bye-bye.